Rams have officially ruled out some players. We're going to talk about who is sitting out for Sunday's matchup versus Seattle Seahawks. Also, an injury report update, as well as some awards, end of season awards that the Rams have given out internally inside the Rams organization. All that and much more on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Joshua Giron. If you guys are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and press that subscribe button right now, as 87.1% of you guys still are not subscribed to the channel, but you're watching the video, so we appreciate you guys watching. But hit the subscribe button so we know that you guys don't miss any daily Rams content here at the Rams Digest. Let's get into this first story here. Before we get into the injury news and who's sitting out and whatnot, I wanted to get into the end of year awards for the Rams. A quick little small story that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, the Rams kind of getting to the end of their season, right? 1 week left versus Seattle Seahawks. They actually handed out some awards to some players, so we're going to talk about who those players are, what awards they got, and kind of, give a little bit of a shout out to some of these guys who got their recognition within the building, at least, of the Rams organization. So let's actually pull this up already. Not really much else to dive into. It's a whole story here, obviously. Shout out to our staff reporter here who's writing this whole story, but Stu Jackson, I believe is his name. I just wanted to kind of pull this whole screenshot up because it actually was 3 awards, and it's pretty easy to kind of see all 3 of them here. If you guys have trouble seeing, I'll read them off real quick. Quarterback Matthew Stafford receives the Daniel F. Reeves Memorial Award, which is essentially the team's most valuable player. This is the second year straight for Matthew Stafford, Rams quarterback, to be receiving this award, so shout out to Matthew Stafford. Outside linebacker Jared Verse, he got the Carol Rosenblum Award, the Memorial Award, given to the players of the team's Rookie of the Year. So, we already talked about Jared Verse being potentially the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Shout out to him getting the inside the Rams organization. Of course, kind of an obvious choice, Jared Verse, the Rookie of the Year within the organization. And then an interesting name, I think one that we've talked about, how important Tyler Higbee is to this organization, how important he is to the team and the success of the team. Maybe not Travis Kelce, top tight end numbers, which I keep saying Travis Kelce as if he had a great year this year, but top 5, tight end numbers, maybe not, but look at how important he is in the building, as he missed most of the season, didn't really play all year long, yet tight end Tyler Higbee receives the Carl Eckern Award, Spirit of the Game Award. So that's given to the player who exemplifies sportsmanship, ethic, and commitment to his teammates. And the Ed Block Courage Award, given to a player who is a role model of inspiration, sportsmanship, and courage. So ultimately, just an awesome thing to see from the Rams within the organization, right? Giving out these memorial awards to players who are well deserving of these awards. MVP for Matthew Stafford, Rookie of the Year for Jared Verse, and then obviously Tyler Higbee getting that sportsmanship kind of award that really just shows that the team, the organization rallied around him through his injury, and how important he is to the team, how much they love him as a person and as a player, that even though he didn't play all year long, he was still an inspiration to his teammates as he was committed to the team. He must have obviously been doing a lot of things outside of the view of the fans that we can really acknowledge and honor, then say, they appreciate what Tyler Higbee brings to the table as an athlete for the Los Angeles Rams. So shout out to all 3 of those players for getting their end of year awards. Definitely a nice thing to see. Kind of surprising, right, to get this fast, to be here already, right, at this point in the NFL season already over, or we're getting to that point where the playoffs are right around the corner. But still awesome to see the players get acknowledged in the way that they did. So shout out to the Rams for giving out these special awards. Moving on to the next bit of news I want to talk about, injury report, right? We do want to talk about who is injured or who might be missing from the game and who might be starting in their place. We've been talking about this conversation, right? Who's resting, who's playing versus Seattle Seahawks, as this game does have some implications that we'll get into later on. We've already talked about it, but I did want to give an updated opinion on kind of where we're at in terms of resting starters and in terms of what it means for the Rams in terms of their playoff implications. But for right now, we can see here as the Rams have released their first injury report of Week 18, and kind of really not really much of a surprise here, as we already knew they were going to rest Rob Havenstein. It sounds like that is going to be the case. Sean McVay himself speaking on the situation, we can actually pull up his quote now, as Sean McVay says, Rob will be, meaning that Rob will be out. He'll be a guy that, because of his injury status, that sorts itself out. the thing is, everything is tilting towards he'll be ready to go for that playoff game. And I think that was kind of the conversation we've been having, right, about resting players. You see Rob Havenstein get hurt in practice, missed the game. Joe Noteboom did the best he could, I'm sure, but it was really kind of ugly at times, right, in terms of flags on Joe Noteboom. It just felt like we were kind of noticing his name a lot throughout the game, and he was actually, the Rob Havenstein injury actually came up in conversation during the game because of acknowledging a couple of issues that Joe Noteboom was having in his place. But regardless, we already know how important Rob Havenstein is to his team, his organization. So, of course, having him on the field healthy, ready to go is important. The good thing is, it sounds like from Sean McVay's perspective, it's not really anything to worry about in terms of the playoffs. They're going to rest them probably regardless this week. Let them rest in practice. Let them rest in the game from the game, and then obviously next week hit the ground running, ready to partake in the playoff game, whoever it is they match up with week 1 of the wild card of the playoffs. So, yeah, that's kind of where it's at right now in terms of injury report. Now, in terms of players that we know are sitting out officially, one of the big names that we know for sure that are 100% sitting out is quarterback Matthew Stafford, as was officially announced. Jimmy Garoppolo will be taking his place. Now, we know a lot about Jimmy G from his days in San Francisco, of course, New England, and last year with the Raiders. We'll talk about some stats right now, but here's what Jimmy G had to say about starting in Matthew Stafford's place. I think anytime you get on the field or on the grass in live action, that's your resume. What you do out there, everyone sees around the league. They're going to break that tape down, good, bad, or indifferent. They don't really care who's playing, what week it is, whatever it is, that's your resume. So that's how I've always approached it. It'll be no different this week. And I think we do have to remember that Jimmy G was a backup quarterback for many years in New England behind Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, arguably. I don't know, whatever you guys want to feel about Tom Brady, but Jimmy G was a backup quarterback, right, for a few years. So he was in that mindset of, once I get on the field, anytime I step onto the grass, that is my opportunity to show the league, hey, I can still play football. I can still be a starting quarterback for you. I can go out and start. Obviously, back in the early days, he was just trying to show teams that he can start. But now, showing at this point in his career, played with the Raiders, kind of a rough year. We'll pull the numbers up right now in a second, but rough time with the Raiders. He's sitting there saying, hey, look, give me an opportunity. I'm going to prove to everyone that I can still play, which is kind of good, right? I think the Rams, maybe some people first hear it, they might say, ooh, he's not thinking about winning. He's not thinking about the team. He's not thinking about the Rams. He's thinking about himself and his resume. But I think that's the reality of his situation. I think the important thing is, the cool thing about it is he's going to play hard. He's going to go out there wanting to succeed, and that's what the Rams need, right? Yes, we are talking about this Rams benching situation. If they bench their starters and they lose, what could possibly happen in terms of their playoff matchup? But what if they win, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is a player who's had many, many football games under his belt, many wins, playoffs. We've seen him in San Francisco take the team to the Super Bowl, and so that's the capabilities that Jimmy G has as a quarterback. So let's not act like, just because Jimmy G started, that means all of a sudden the game is lost. There is a chance that Jimmy G goes out there, competes well, hard. He hasn't really been playing all year long, so he's ready to go, healthy, probably really rejuvenated and excited to improve on his resume, and show everybody and show the rest of the league, hey, if you need a quarterback, give me a call, because I'm going to go out there and beat Seattle, right? And so that's going to be his mindset for sure from Jimmy Garoppolo. So pretty excited to see it. Moving on, talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, I almost said Garoppolo. Here talking about Jimmy G, I did want to pull up his stats from last season. Of course, not the best of stats, obviously, as he didn't really last too long with the Raiders, but 65% completion percentage, not bad. 1,200 passing yards with an average of 7 yards per attempt. 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Not really great in terms of that ratio. 77.7 passer rating for last season, but hey, 97.6 passer rating for his career. So overall, Jimmy G, good quarterback. We know who he is. We've seen him play before. I think he's actually going to go out there and play pretty well, depending on who else is healthy, who else is ready to go for him. Is he going to have Puka Nacua and all that stuff? As far as I know, we haven't got an official word on that yet. And so I think that's kind of the important key here, right? So let's see what he has to work with out there, and but I do think we'll see some moments of Jimmy G looking like a backup quarterback, looking like he hasn't played in a while, a little bit of rust to knock off. He's 33 years old at the end of the day, who again not really playing well last time he played for an NFL team starting wise, but hey, we'll see what he looks like. I'm sure he'll look fine. I think he'll have his moments of okay, it looks a little rough, but also have moments of, hey, that's a pretty good play from a backup quarterback. And I think Jimmy G is more than capable of winning this game. You guys let me know how you guys feel about Jimmy G starting this game on Sunday. Last but not least, I did want to pull this up because last video I posted on New Year's Day, a lot of people were talking about the playoff seeding and kind of saying, one, I do want to apologize for not acknowledging that the Rams have beat the Vikings this season. But that was a long time ago, right? I was actually at that game. And so it was a long time ago. Let's not act like just because the Rams beat them. First of all, it's very difficult to beat a team twice in one season. But let's not act like beating Minnesota, however many weeks ago it was, really means that they're going to automatically beat the Vikings this playoff matchup, if that's the matchup they end up falling with, right? But let's also acknowledge, I did say the Minnesota Vikings was a scary scenario. But I think also the Detroit Lions is a real possibility that could be your team that comes in. And actually saw a YouTube comment as well in our last video saying that they'd rather prefer to play Detroit to get their get back from last year's playoffs. I understand that mentality as well. Hey, look, we're not the players. Why are we afraid to play any team? Sure, I get it. I'm just simply acknowledging, hey, look, as a fan, I think we want the best and easiest route to get to the Super Bowl because I want the Rams in the Super Bowl. I don't really care what you want to say. Oh, I don't want the easy route. Give me every good team. You can have that opinion if you want. I'm just simply saying I want to see the Rams in the Super Bowl. If the best route would be them having the easiest path to get to the Super Bowl, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at in terms of my confidence of the Rams. Any team I think you're rooting for, I don't mind if it's an easy path. Get me to the championship. I want to win the bowl. That's kind of my perspective from the Rams. But yeah, I'm ready and excited to see who the Rams are going to play, no matter who they play, as they do have multiple options, and so are multiple different teams that we could possibly play, right? So I do want to pull this up here, and I want to pull the first one. This is probably the most likely scenario, I think, in my opinion. I think this is kind of what I expect, or one of the more likely scenarios. Sorry, I forgot what I changed here. So this is one of the likely scenarios for the Rams. And I want to talk about this for a second to see what you guys think about it. This would be somehow, some way, the Dallas Cowboys beat the Washington Commanders. I know the Cowboys are in a bad place right now as an organization, as they have been the last few years. And the Washington Commanders, obviously are better, but the better team. They're probably going to win that game. But say, for example, this is a way that we can kind of switch things up a little bit. If somehow, some way, the Cowboys beat the Washington Commanders, this is kind of what that would look like, that scenario, right? I want to make sure I pull the right screenshot up. So the Rams, if they take care of business, they beat Seattle. Even if Tampa Bay wins, doesn't matter. The Rams would be solid in that third seed, and the Rams would be playing the 6th-seeded Green Bay Packers in this specific scenario. Not a bad team to match up with, right? A 12-5 team, a win team, a good team. I think the Packers, we saw what they did last year to the Dallas Cowboys as well in the playoff game, right? Kind of demolished them, indoor arena or stadium. And so we can see what the Packers can do in indoors. Young team, they're ready to go. They got multiple weapons. They don't have maybe that one true number one wide receiver, but they have Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, and they got the tight ends, they got the running game going. So I do think that is a tough team to match up with. I think the Green Bay Packers would be a tough, difficult team to match up with. Also, a little bit of a friendly matchup. They have a friendship kind of battle, rivalry, right, with the head coaches, and that's its scenario. So interesting one that I think is very possible to happen, but I don't know if I really would guess the Cowboys would beat the Washington Commanders, so that's kind of why I don't really want to look at this one too long. That's just a possible scenario, interesting scenario for the Rams. One that I think is okay. I wouldn't be too concerned about it, but a solid matchup nonetheless. That I would be, interested to see what happens. Then I want to pull up the next one. As the next one we would have is, this is the kind of likely scenario I think the Rams would likely find themselves in. So in this scenario, Washington takes care of business versus the Cowboys. No matter if Green Bay wins or loses, doesn't matter. The Washington Commanders would be the 6th seed. The Rams would be the 3rd seed, locked in if they take care of business. Again, regardless of what Tampa Bay does. Rams stays 3rd seed. Commanders play versus the Rams in LA. 3rd seed versus 6th seed. This is kind of a scenario that I personally think that's the route that the Rams want to take. Now, there was an interesting comment on one of the YouTube videos we posted saying that the Commanders would be a tough team to play because the Rams don't do well versus running quarterbacks. Who really does do good versus running quarterbacks? I understand that concern. Jaden Daniels does run a lot. It's a difficult thing to kind of have deal with a dual threat quarterback, but that is just generally speaking the team that has the least experience, the least, the lesser of the four evils, again, like I said, of the potential matchups for the Rams. That is the matchup I think would be best for the Rams in terms of potentially moving on to the next round, which is what we all want to see. That's kind of the one that I would like to see. Now, pulling up to the next one, the ones that get a little bit tougher, the ones that I'm kind of a little bit more generally speaking concerned about. This is the screenshot that I used last week as well, that people got a little bit upset about, saying I didn't mention that we beat Minnesota already. I get it. We beat Minnesota already. That doesn't really mean much when it comes down to this game. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to win again. It's two different teams now compared to what that was back then. But you're right. We did beat the Minnesota Vikings already. So maybe if you're a Rams fan, you say, hey, we beat Minnesota already. I'm not afraid of Sam Darnold. Let's go ahead and take care of business. This scenario, I don't mind. Rams, Jimmy G doesn't do what he has to do. He loses versus Seattle Seahawks. It is what it is. We'll move on. We'll get ready for our wild card matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings if Detroit takes care of business in their matchup versus the Vikings. Vikings are a good team. What happens if this is kind of the worst case scenario, I think, for the Rams? If the Minnesota Vikings beat the Detroit Lions, they showed they're a better team. What if this scenario is where you find yourself? And that's why I was talking about when I was saying why I'm quote unquote concerned or scared. I don't want to say that I'm afraid like if I'm a player, but I'm simply saying and acknowledging if I'm the Rams in the room, I'm saying, well, yes, we want to rest Matthew Stafford. We're going to rest Matthew Stafford. Jimmy G's playing. We're going to rest Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, whoever else they decide to rest, right? Rob Havenstein. But let's think for a second about the negative, the cons of doing that, the cons of losing your game. If you lose versus Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take care of business and they beat the New Orleans Saints, you find yourself in a scenario where if Minnesota beats Detroit on Sunday, you are playing the Detroit Lions at home. Now, maybe some fans, like I've seen in the comments, are saying, great, I want to play Detroit again. I want to beat them for Matthew Stafford's sake, for his career, right? Beat that team that moved on from him after a decade of playing for them. Let's see Matthew Stafford get his kind of revenge game, right? We wanted to beat them last year in the playoffs. Didn't happen. Wanted to beat them opening night. Didn't happen. Let's beat them in the playoffs. Let's show the league that we are for real. Everyone's saying Detroit's going to the Super Bowl. Let's cut that off now. End it round one in the wild card and beat the Lions, send them home if this scenario goes through. I understand that perspective. I'm just simply acknowledging that is a negative, scarier situation. If generally speaking, if you're talking about likelihood of the Rams winning or projecting who the Rams can beat, most likely, I would say Detroit is the lowest matchup, right, in terms of percentage chance you would give the Rams of winning that game. But the Rams, they're a hardworking team. They're going to go into any game with the mentality they can win. They're going to be ready to win. They're going to prepare to play hard. I think the Rams are ready to play whoever they are going to end up playing in that wild card round. You guys let me know what your most preferred matchup is. That's kind of what the whole point of this is as well. Just have a little bit of fun with it, right? I don't really care who the Rams play, but if I had to choose, those are the teams I would choose. You guys let me know who you would choose for the Rams to play in the comments below. That's going to do it for me on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Joshua Giron, and I am out.